Thanks for clicking. China's real estate crisis continued to heat up this week as we received news that the mortgage boycotts have been spreading to even more projects. And the crisis is spreading from private developers to state-owned enterprises to those developers with the backing of Beijing, which are having a difficult time securing financing to complete their projects. With continual mortgage boycotts and defaults on behalf of China's property developers, the real estate crisis hit its one-year anniversary with its 12th straight month of price declines.
Want to celebrate?
So what I want to do today is go over China's revving up mortgage boycotts, take a look at the number of state-backed developers which are defaulting on their debts, which is not a good sign, and then discuss how far China's property crisis has come in the past 12 months. As we'll see, it's been a year since China's property crisis started, when the warning started to emerge that Evergrande was going to default on its debt, and the crisis has shown no signs of slowing down. We'll continue to track developments with China's real estate sector and its growing economic problems on this channel every Friday. Click like and subscribe if you want to get those updates, but for now, let's get into these boycotts. We spoke last month about China censoring any data pertaining to the spreading mortgage boycotts that were plaguing China's real estate industry.
We're not discussing this again.
Since then, data has been scant on the extent to which these boycotts have spread, with only news coming out that Beijing was putting more pressure on its real estate developers to finish their projects as a means to quell these protests. However, it was reported this week that the number of protests had spread to 342 projects, up from the 320 projects that were reported last month. With construction still delayed and not resuming on many of the projects in question, a number of homebuyers told Reuters that they too planned on joining the protest in the coming weeks and months ahead if their homes are not completed. Beijing has set up a $44 billion bailout fund for these developers to get these projects completed to end these mortgage boycotts, but a senior executive at one of the developers said there's not going to be enough money to go around. So there is going to be more demands for Beijing to step in further to get these projects completed, to get these mortgage boycotts squashed. But it's not just private developers that might need help from Beijing, as it was reported this week that state-owned enterprises, state-owned developers, or developers with the backing of Beijing are also starting to default on their debts. According to a new report from Citi, bad loans in China from the real estate developers surged to 29% this year, up from last year's 24%, a 5% increase in the number of bad loans coming from the property sector, which were due in large part to these state-owned enterprises, these SOEs, not paying their bills. Not paying their bills for much of the same reason as the private developers are not paying their bills. A lack of funding, a drying up of financing that's available. The report from Citi noted that there is a spillover effect from POE developer defaults, leaving even some SOE developers with financing difficulties and heightened debt default risk. So these state-owned enterprises, these developers with the backing of Beijing, are having problems getting financing, having problems completing their projects in much of the same manner that the privately owned developers have been having problems. Non-performing loans, bad loans on the part of privately owned enterprises is one thing, but it's a whole nother thing when the state-backed developers, the developers which the banks think have the backing of Beijing, start to default on their loan. If these bad loans on the part of these state-backed developers continue to default, it will put even more pressure on the industry as a whole, as if even those developers with the state backing can't pay their debts, what is the likelihood that the private developers will be able to pay their debts?
I won't let you down.
This is probably going to lead to even more calls for Beijing to step in to provide even more emergency bailout funding for the real estate sector. And in the one-year anniversary of this crisis, we are getting even more evidence of the extent of the damage, with real estate prices continuing to drop at the fastest pace month over month since November of 2021, and at the fastest pace year over year since November of 2015. So prices are falling year over year at the quickest pace than they have been in 7 years. with developers not completing their projects, with homeowners refusing to make their mortgage payments until they receive their homes. Greedy. The demand on the part of Chinese homebuyers to enter into this market just isn't there. Chen Wenjing, a researcher at China Index Holdings, said that Beijing is probably going to have to provide much more supportive measures in order to entice Chinese homebuyers back into the real estate market. And while Beijing has lowered interest rates over the past few months, the PBOC has lowered interest rates, they obviously have not been enough to get Chinese homebuyers to return back to the real estate market. And Beijing has been hesitant to provide too much stimulus to the market, as there is a real fear that they will enter into the inflationary pressures that we've seen here in the West. They don't want to see their prices rise by 5, 7, 10%, in much the same manner that we've seen here in the US and in Canada, and in Europe and in the UK, etc., etc. So, all in all, definitely not another great week for China's real estate market news, with mortgage boycotts continuing to spread, with even the public real estate developers having their bad loans start to add up, and entering the 1-year anniversary of the worries over Evergrande, China has now seen their 12th straight month of real estate declines, of real estate price drops. All in all, not great signs, but all signs that Beijing is going to have to step up with their intervention in the market. And this is at a time when Beijing is already having some major problems with zero COVID, and well ahead of the 20th Party Congress, which is President Xi's main focus right now. So Beijing's problems are continuing to add up in its real estate sector and obviously in its economy, with real estate constituting such a large part of the Chinese economy. Whether or not Beijing will step up to the plate and provide sufficient support to get the real estate market back up and running again remains to be seen, but we'll obviously continue to have updates out on Beijing's moves on this channel every Friday. Click like and subscribe if you want to get those updates, but for now, thanks so much for watching.